Alrighty, welcome back to the podcast.
We're going to have a special guest today.
That's a lot of specials. Back in the studio, solo fitness, getting it.
Hello.
Oh, we can hear you.
My name's Audrey Denham. I'm a current senior at Transylvania University. I'm also a member of the field hockey team and have been for all 4 years of my collegiate career. And I'm also from Louisville, Kentucky, so didn't travel too far for college. And I'm currently a writing, rhetoric, and communications major, as well as a digital arts and media minor. So that's where I'm at right now with my life and my career. So,
what do you plan on doing with that?
I actually recently just applied to the FBI. So hopefully that works out, but I'm really up for anything in terms of marketing or advertising or staying with athletics and doing something with marketing and sports. So just kind of anything and everything right now.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. What do you want to do with the FBI?
So right now I applied for the position of human resources just because a lot of the other things were like IT and, like a special agent. So I'm trying to kind of dip my toes in something to see where it goes because they have a lot of flexibility with positions. So I applied for human resources at the moment, but that could lead to a lot of other things that I could do there.
So do you want to tell us a little bit about your senior project that you're doing?
Yeah, definitely. So at the moment, my senior seminar project is about female athletes and mental health. So what I'm really doing is showcasing advocacy as well as just the history of female athletes with mental health. Since in the past with Title IX and everything, it wasn't always talked about and there was always a stigma behind it and still is. But a big part of what I'm doing is I work in tandem with the Hidden Opponent, which is a nonprofit organization that was founded by a girl who went to USC and played D1 volleyball. And she created this organization to further that conversation and to have that conversation about mental health in general, but there's also other platforms out there for female athletes. So what I'm doing with my project is not only sharing my story with anxiety and mental health during my collegiate career, but also just sharing other people's stories, seeing the different levels of why mental health is not being talked about from an athletic department standpoint, psychology standpoint, former athletes. So showcasing just a big overview of everything that's going on with the conversation. So I'm creating a website, doing a companion piece. So just trying to encompass every single aspect of mental health with female athletes.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah.
So what would you say is like, are you open to share like your story with?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think over my 4 years, I've kind of gotten more confident about sharing my story and opening up that conversation. So my freshman and sophomore year, I battled a lot with anxiety and imposter syndrome and just not feeling like I was in the place that I should have been and that I was really not at the same level as my peers. I dealt with a lot of verbal and mental abuse by those who were in power and had authority over me at the time in my career. So that was not a great environment to be in. So my mental health kind of deteriorated over time, especially my freshman and sophomore year, which were critical years in the fact that I was starting at a new place, obviously continuing my sport, but not necessarily being with the same people that I was in high school. So I battled a lot with not really feeling like I was in the place that I needed to be in terms of mentally and physically. So they both kind of battled each other at the same time. And I still definitely struggle with those same challenges and struggles that I did my freshman and sophomore year. They just kind of involve themselves in other situations that I'm in, there's still that little ounce of me that always worries about stuff or has a lot of, overthinking in terms of different situations that go on within my athletics and even carries outside of my athletics. So I still battle with that, but the whole point of me sharing my story is so that others feel comfortable with doing that as well, because I don't think that conversation was really open when I was a freshman. And I know that my peers and teammates also struggle with those same battles and other mental health issues. So I've really gained a good confidence enough to where I can share that and make sure that other people are also doing well mentally and physically.
Yeah, I mean, that's really cool. Like, props to you for sharing your story for anyone to hear, really. I had a question before I said that. Gosh dang it.
Well,
I hate my brain sometimes.
yeah. Sometimes it's good to write them down.
The question was, do you think, I know you said like a lot of your peers struggle with it. Do you think this is like a problem at any level of sports, or do you think it's like specifically like collegiate? And do you think it gets worse the farther you get up, like into like your super like UK football, let's just say, or I mean, that's a guy sport, but you get the point.
Yeah.
Like, do you think there's more people in power, so therefore more people like struggle with these issues?
Oh, absolutely. Like, one example that comes to mind is, I don't know if you follow like the NFL or anything, but recently there was a situation that happened with Dak Prescott, who's a player for the Dallas Cowboys. And he recently spoke out about his mental health struggles. His brother had passed away from suicide. And so he had spoken out about how this year was just really hard for him. He had a lot of anxiety and depression, and he was really struggling and had spoken out about it, so to help other people. And Skip Bayless, who's a well-known reporter and sportscaster, he kind of negatively talked about the way that Dak Prescott was speaking out and just kind of bashed him for speaking out and feeling that way, and was just calling him weak, and not really recognizing the fact that he took a lot of courage to speak out about it, especially since Dak Prescott's own brother struggled with mental health as well. So I think it definitely, since it's not really recognized in professional levels, it trickles down a lot to the lower level, or not the lower levels, but other levels as well. I think there's more and more people that are realizing with these conversations that it's an issue in every single level. It can happen within grade school level, high school level, collegiate, D1, D2, D3, NAI, any sport. I think that's why there's so many platforms that are coming out, is because it's an all-around issue. And I think with it not being recognized at different athletic programs, it only can get worse. So I think that's why it's great that there's all these advocacy groups coming out and being like, hey, this is an issue and it needs to be addressed now at every single level. And it doesn't matter what your sport is, what your gender is, what your age is. It affects everybody and anybody. Everybody has their struggles, whether big or small. So I think it's definitely being recognized that it's an all-around issue and not a specific issue like in the NFL or the MLB or anything like that. It's at every single level and at every single person's individual experience. So for me, I've found that there's a lot more people that I didn't realize that had their own mental health struggles in grade school or high school, which is kind of upsetting to me that it happened so early on. So that's really why I'm doing what I'm doing. It's just to get the word out and have those conversations.
Would you say, I'm going to hype you up for a second, okay? But
okay.
Would you say, like, I mean, you went to a high school and you were one of like the better field hockey players there, for your 4 years. Would you say that you had these mental health issues in high school? They were just masked because, like, you were, like, the superstar of the team kind of thing? Or did they develop in college?
Honestly, I think about that a lot because I think they only kind of, like, surface themselves in college. And I think for the longest time in high school, I was always on the go, always busy. And I don't think I ever had a time to sit there and be like, wow, I was actually really struggling and not really recognizing a lot of the issues that I had with myself, just issues of feeling inadequate or felt like I wasn't doing enough. And I think that's kind of the issue with a lot of individuals is that they don't really have the time to think about it. So a lot of times it gets suppressed. And like you said, it gets masked almost at times just because people don't fully realize, like, oh, this is actually classified as anxiety or depression or imposter syndrome or an eating disorder. And I think people don't really necessarily always recognize it, which is why these conversations are so helpful because people don't even realize it, especially when you're at a younger age.
Right.
And I think in high school, I never really was like educated about mental health. So I think that also plays a role in everything, that the educational side of things, you're always taught about what you should do in terms of your physical health. I mean, there's all these PE classes, but there's never really an opportunity for a mental health kind of education or learning experience. So I think that also plays a role with it not being fully acknowledged or recognized with individuals.
Yeah, I agree. Like, you have a health class in high school. Like, I mean, most high schools do. But, I mean, you're taught, like, physical health and, like, nutrition and stuff like that. You're not taught about mental health. And another thing is, like, you mentioned, like, nobody really knows what classifications or what criteria meets depression, anxiety, eating disorders, anything like that, because the words are just so thrown around nowadays where it's like, oh, I'm having anxiety because, and it's really just you're stressed probably. Or like you're depressed, but you're not really depressed, but you're just saying you're depressed. You're actually just like sad. Like everybody's sad. Sad and depression are a different thing. So I think it's hard for younger people to know the difference and know that what they're feeling isn't necessarily normal because the words are so thrown around.
Yeah, definitely. Mental health manifests itself differently within both groups. I mean, with males especially, I think there's always been a stereotype that, especially with male athletes, they've always like never had the opportunity to speak up about their mental health. And like you all said, with, you know, it was more present in their behaviors and not necessarily verbally. And I think there's always, since there is that stigma, especially for males, you know, they're always not necessarily given that opportunity to speak out about it or really able to even say anything in general. And I think athletes in general have that, you know, presence of, I need to be tough. I need to not have issues. I don't want to seem weak. And I think that's why a lot of people are drawn away from speaking up about it and being like, oh, maybe I do have this issue going on or this battle going on within me. Because I always think about, you know, you go to the doctor when you have a broken arm or when you have something wrong with your physical appearance, but you never really say, oh, maybe I need to go and seek help for things that you can't necessarily see, which makes it 10 times harder to really recognize it. But with females, I think we also have kind of like that double standard of, you know, we want to speak out about it, but then we're also kind of hesitant about it with the athlete side of us saying like, okay, well, we need to be strong. We need to actually like persevere and move on from it and not recognize it.
You don't want to be seen weaker than we already are as women.
Right. Exactly. So it was like when there was opportunities that presented themselves for me as a female athlete, I wanted to take advantage of them, but I didn't want to say, okay, well, I do have these battles, but some people have it worse. so I always felt like I didn't need to speak out or speak up about it because I felt like I was doing a disservice to other people who might have had it worse, which is another problem in itself.
Yeah.
But I think there's definitely an all around stigma of mental health, like for both genders. And there's always that hesitancy to speak up about it for fear of retaliation or seeming weak.
Yeah, and you kind of mentioned how people go to the doctor for a broken arm or whatever. Two things. First of all, a broken arm is a broken arm. You know, mental health is mental health. Like, whether you have it worse or not, like, it doesn't make it less than. And, like, also, we need to start seeing therapy as going to the doctor, because that's what it is. Just because it's not a doctor visit, it's like you're helping yourself. You know, you're healing.
Right. Yeah. Well, and we started having a sports psychologist come in. They were mostly master students at UK that came in, but it propelled our program and our team alone and our mental health. It made such a big difference with having somebody there, like you said, to normalize having therapy and seeking help and being comfortable with doing that. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, your mental health can affect your physical health.
Right.
So having those resources, I mean, some D3 programs don't even have that opportunity, or even D2 programs don't as well. So normalizing the fact that you need to institute that into your athletic department and program can only do more good than harm. And I think that's the thing that people have slowly started to realize, but not realized it enough.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, mental health, just like you said, all around is an issue, but I mean, it affects us in so many ways.
Right.
So what would you say are like resources that you're given as an athlete for your mental health?
Yeah. So at the moment, we do have, just in general for mental health, without being an athlete, we do have like campus well-being on campus, and we have different counselors that a lot of people, before we had the sports psychology students come in, that was really our only resource before last year that we had. So we only had just counselors that weren't necessarily trained to deal with the different battles and situations that athletes are presented with. So that was our past kind of resources, opportunities. But at the moment, we still have those resources, but we also have the new sports psychology student that we have right now. But that's kind of like as far as it goes. We do have obviously the opportunity to go to our coaches or our athletic department, but at the same time, that's always not the most welcomed experience at a lot of different athletic programs. Because you don't.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Would you say that, like, let's say you do approach a coach, do you think that there's this stigma that if I approach my coach, then he or she is gonna think less than of me, and then like he's not gonna play me, or he's just gonna overall just think less than of me? Do you think that's like a reason that?
Absolutely.
So.
Oh yeah, and I think when somebody is coming at like freshman year, I think that I felt so discouraged from going to my coach because it was such a new experience that I didn't want to say, oh, well, I'm having these issues like right off the bat, because I felt like that made me look weak and made me less of a player, which at the end of the day, it only makes you stronger about talking out about it and being able to have those conversations. But I think a lot of people don't want to go to their coaches, especially if they don't have that relationship with them in the first place. They don't want to go to their coaches and present these issues if their coaches don't fully recognize that mental health is a thing, and it's not a switch that you can just turn on and off and say, hey, I need this day to take off. I think that they have to fully realize that mental health affects people on a daily basis, and that it stays with them. It just doesn't go away when it's on a Tuesday at 5 p.m. it doesn't go away. It stays with you. And so I think a lot of people are discouraged from going near their coaches or their athletic department because they don't want to have that fear of, oh, they're going to see me as somebody that can't handle their problems or, aren't able to, take a situation and move forward from it and be strong about it. So I definitely think there's that.
Yeah, I agree. What would you say the education around mental health, nutrition, physical activity, any of that type of stuff, do you think that's do you get an adequate education on that, or is that lacked? What is that like for you?
So mental health, I think that's a work in progress all around. I think that, like you all said, I think there's a lot of coaches and people that are within athletics that recognize mental health and that have gone through those experiences. But I also think that you have outliers as well for people that don't fully recognize it. I know I talked to our athletic director who has spoken about how she incorporates mental health questions into the interview process to see how they, recognize it or don't recognize it. And it's more situational stuff. So I love that about our athletic department, that they're making those steps to actually fully recognize it and educate people, especially after they get accepted or they end up in the coaching job. There's a lot of education that goes behind it, but I still think that there needs to be more, just because there have been issues in the past with that. But in terms of nutrition, that's one thing. I'm taking a health and wellness class right now. That's kind of mandated by our university, which is incredible.
It is.
Because there's a lot of things that I've learned as a senior that I never knew in my whole entire collegiate athletic career. There's things that we would do after away games, that we would eat pizza as a post-game meal. And I'm learning about all these different foods that I should eat and not eat after a game, or, just in general, nutritional stuff that I should incorporate throughout my day that I was never educated about or given knowledge about. And we do have a resource on campus that just joined this year. But she is just kind of in and out all the time, and we don't necessarily sit down with her and talk with her each week, or we don't have somebody to sit there and make meals for us. In most D1 athletics, they have a lot of different buildings that people go to, that athletes go to get food. We don't have those type of resources, especially being a D3 program. So nutrition is still something that is so lacking in the athletics field. There's just not enough education out there, and I'm a huge advocate with having coaches be more equipped to have these nutritional type classes before they even come into a collegiate program, especially. It's a little different in high school just because you have an array of different people that come in and help with high school programs. But I think especially for collegiate programs, it's critical to have somebody that is in a position of authority to know how to equip their athletes with proper nutrition, and saying, okay, maybe we need to dedicate more funds and more financial money into what we give these athletes to eat. Because at the end of the day, if you're not eating good, you're not going to perform good. And if you're not fueling your body with the right things, if you're eating pizza after games, your body is going to know, okay, that's not something that should be coming into my body after I just did this full-on game. And so I think nutrition is a big thing that still lacks, especially in D3 programs. And I think there needs to be a lot more education about that, especially for coaches.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like you said, you can't expect your players to perform if you're not fueling their body. So like there do need to be classes for coaches to take for, and it could literally be like a small class encompassing all of these things, all of health, like mental health, nutrition, physical activity outside of your sport.
Right.
Because I mean, like you said, like your coaches should be like, hey guys, like maybe we shouldn't go get a pizza after this game. Like let's fuel our body with something like more optimal for post game to enhance our performance. And like a pizza's okay. Like that's not, like there's no issue with eating pizza. It's just not going to really rebuild what you just broke down playing that game.
Exactly, yeah.
As a college student, on top of being an athlete, how many hours a week would you say that you get sleep or per night?
Oh gosh. In the past, I would say it was roughly around like 6 hours to 7 hours. Especially being a D3 athlete, obviously there's a lot more opportunity to do a lot of other things on campus within organizations and clubs and all that. I've gotten better about making sure that I get enough sleep. Like I always make sure that we've had a ton of morning practices at the moment. So if I need to wake up at 6 a.m. in the morning, I'm making sure that I'm at least going to bed by, 9 or 10. So, I mean, when I was a freshman, I even realized, like, that's not even one of the top things that I was thinking of in terms of sleep. I was like, okay, well, I need to get my assignments done. Like, who cares about sleep? Like,
right, and
I had that mindset.
Yeah, that's like, something our coaches need to push. Like,
yeah.
Coaches should push for you all to be going to bed. I mean, you don't need a curfew, but like, hey guys, like make sure you're getting 8 hours of sleep a night. Like, we have morning practice. Like, I need you to be alert and doing your best. Society normalizes and also like praises college students, and like you're more cool if you don't get sleep, you stay up all night doing homework, and you're blacking out 3 times a week. Then if you're like putting your health first and going to bed at a decent time and having a good routine and a schedule. So like until we can again make that the cool thing to do, we're not going to see a change.
Yeah. Well, and I think that our society is such like a go, go, go busy. Like I need to not have a moment to sit down, or on the complete opposite side, they're like, okay, well, relaxation is a great thing, but at the same time, our society is such on the go that we don't really fully recognize, like, okay, we need to take a moment to know, that's okay to be busy, but if you're not taking care of yourself, then there's not really much that you can do further about that. But yeah.
I think a lot of people too stay busy doing the wrong things.
Right.
Like, they say they're busy, but by that they mean they have a party tonight at 11. Like, are you busy, or are you making a priority to do something else? Like, those things are okay if it's something that you do on occasion, but like you said, doing it a couple times a week and, getting 3 to 4 hours of sleep a night, it's definitely not the route.
What would you say your college experience has been as a student athlete? Like, I mean, like, just like a summary, like, was it good? Was it bad? Was it good and bad? Was it bad then good? Like, if you had to summarize it, how would you summarize it?
So I think I had a lot of expectations coming in when I first committed to Transy for field hockey, and just deciding on Transy as a school. I think originally I thought, coming from a small Catholic school and everybody knowing everybody, professors being very individualized with your education, I thought that's the exact same thing that I'm going to get at Transy, especially with athletics. I'm going to be recognized for what I'm doing and the hard work that I'm putting in. And I think having such high expectations coming in, I was not prepared for everything that was going to come after. I think there were moments of good. I think the people that I met over my entire 4 years have been incredible. I've met friends that helped me through all the times that I struggled with mental health. I would say freshman and sophomore year were not the greatest mental health wise, but I think overall, in my athletic career, I think that I picked up a lot of good experiences and utilized a lot of those times that I was struggling and kind of picked out like a lot of the positives that came from it. And I think over time that I started to like kind of realize like, okay, like it's okay that I went through these struggles and I went through all of these experiences because I wouldn't change it for the world. Like, even though a lot of the things that I went through were awful, I think at the same time it made me who I am today. And I would not be in the position of being able to talk to other people about it or have this senior seminar project that is full of advocacy and allowing other people to share their story. I would never be in that position if I were not to go through the things that I went through. So I think at this point in time, overall, I think everything happened for a reason in my athletic career, even if it wasn't the expectations that I had beforehand. I think you can only expect so much out of every situation, regardless if you're an athlete or not. But for me, just being okay with what I've been through, and, you know, doing the best that I can in every situation, and still with COVID and not having a season presently, but having a spring season, just being okay with what I'm doing now and not, you know, beating myself up about not being in, you know, superior fitness shape that I would if I was in season, or, you know, being complacent with other things. I think I'm just valuing the moments that I'm in right now and living in the present so that I'm not looking back at my career and saying, oh, I wish I would have done this. So I think overall, I think that everything happened for a reason, and I'm glad that I went through everything that I did.
There's definitely power in having that mindset. What is one thing or two things, whatever, that you want people to take away from your senior seminar?
Just the overall thing that I'm aiming at with my project is that never be complacent with somebody telling you that what you're going through is not normal, or, you know, having somebody talk down to you or say that your experiences don't matter or that your feelings don't matter. Because at the end of the day, what you're going through is normal and okay and valid. And that's what I really want by sharing my own story, saying that it's okay to speak out and to share your story and to have these, you know, opportunities to connect with so many people that have gone through the same things. But your experience alone matters, and talking about your mental health should be a thing that everybody does, regardless if you're an athlete or not. But for this project in particular, athletes should never be discouraged about talking about mental health or, you know, not being able to do that. And I think the second piece is just making sure that there's a change in the process and the future of athletic programs for instituting being better at talking about and advocating and supporting athletes through their mental health.
So is it a program organization that you're working with, right? Hidden Opponent?
Yeah.
So what is their goal? Do they like travel to colleges and like give like presentations, or like what exactly do they do?
So at the moment, like just because of COVID, a lot of what they're doing is just doing a lot of panels, doing a lot of virtual stuff with people that are talking about, you know, mental health in general. So from the psychology standpoint to the individual athlete standpoint, to also just every single aspect of mental health. They're doing that from a higher level of the founders, the CEO, all of that. But the way that they're doing it is they instituted the campus captains, which is like my role. So at every single level, D3, D2, D1, NAIA as well. They have all these different athletes from different institutions and colleges that are speaking out on their campuses, doing events, doing outreach. I just did a presentation for our student athlete advisory committee. All the athletes at Transy, just speaking out and advocating for mental health to be talked about on campuses. So that's what they're doing as like a national level, with making sure that every campus is doing some sort of change in progress towards talking about mental health as a whole.
Gotcha. So can anybody become part of that, or is it like, how does that work?
So I literally just applied for it, and honestly, anybody can join, whether you want to be a campus captain or just follow along with the organization and help out with these campus captains. Like, just the role as a campus captain is just kind of be the voice of reason and for people to come to you as a support, in a networking opportunity to say, okay, like, Audrey is the campus captain at Transy. Like, I'm going to go to her to see if I can do more on my campus. Even if, you're a freshman, a sophomore, whatever level, anybody can join it. There's a Facebook group, there's an Instagram, a Snapchat, everything that you can think of. Just being able to connect with other people, even if you don't want to necessarily speak out about your struggles in general, just being a part of that community and hearing other people's stories can be very therapeutic. So just joining in general and following along, any kind of participation is welcome for that.
So where can people find that? What is it, just Hidden Opponent on Instagram?
Yes. Yeah. And there's a bunch of different links, like to the Facebook group. It's pretty laid out there about how they can join, or what they can follow along with. But it's just, I believe that it's just the hiddenopponent.org. And then they have all the information about their founder, what they're doing, and the campus captains and all that.
Is this an organization for athletes, or is it for anybody? I mean, I know like anybody can join, but specifically is it geared towards athletes?
Yeah. So
Okay.
it's, so athletes in general. And I know that there's another platform called the Virago Project, which is more so geared towards female athletes. So that's always an option too for people as well.
Okay. And then what are your final tips for student athletes, whether they're coming into college or whether they're in college, like in high school, whatever? What are your overall tips for a student athlete?
So I think initially, my advice and tips for somebody that's coming into a college is utilizing those mental health resources no matter what. If you think that you have, anxiety or depression or an eating disorder, or if you don't even recognize any issue that you have, going to those resources, regardless if you quote unquote have those issues, then you should utilize those resources no matter what, whether you're going through something or not. They're great about just working through the college experience. And obviously with athletes, there's a whole different stressor going on. So I think utilizing those resources, but also, being okay with taking a day or, being real with yourself and being real with your coaches and athletic department and saying, hey, I'm struggling, or, my teammate is struggling. Always being an advocate for yourself first. Always never feel bad about putting yourself first, because a lot of times I would put other people before me, and that only made things worse. So never think that it's not okay to put yourself first and to advocate for yourself. And then obviously always being an advocate for your teammates as well, because you never really truly know what somebody else is going through in terms of their physical or mental health.
I really like those two things because, everybody needs an advocate, and also if we can be an advocate for others, we can be an advocate for ourselves. Like, it's hard to be an advocate for yourself. Like, you know, I mean, nobody ever wants to talk about themselves and put themselves first, but you can't truly be an advocate for other people until you're like an advocate for yourself. And I think becoming an advocate for yourself kind of helps you better understand other people.
Yeah.
All right, so do you just want to tell them where they can find you? And is your project like online or anything like that?
Not yet, but I am still creating my website. I will say that it's called the Denham Devotion. So if you ever see that out there, that is me. But I mean, honestly, I do a lot of advocacy work through my Instagram. So if anybody would want to follow me, it's just my first and last name. So Audrey Denham, and then the number 7.
Do you want to spell your last name?
Yes. Not like the denim jeans, but it's Denham.
So Audrey Denham 7.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. And people can follow you on there and just like, do you post on your story, like, or do you mix it up?
I mix it up. I'm trying to do more stuff. But I also may create a whole Instagram about mental health and like my kind of story, but that's another thing in the future. But for right now, they can just follow me on my normal Instagram and see stories and posts.
Okay. All right. Well, anything else you want to add or say or whatever?
Nothing that I can think of, but you know, just what I've been saying with, you know, just never feel bad about recognizing your struggles and other people's struggles, and just being okay with not being okay sometimes. We all have experiences, and that's just part of life. And, you know, making sure that you're okay, and that you matter, and that no matter if you're an athlete or not, every experience is something, and speaking out about it is not a sign of weakness. It's only strength.
I think that's a great final words. It's not weakness, it's strength. Speaking out. Well, thank you, Audrey, for coming on and your time. I know you're busy. But
absolutely. I'm glad I could do it.
That's the podcast, ladies and gentlemen.
Lots of good advice.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
And go subscribe.
Subscribe, leave a review, write a rating.
Do all the goods.
Write a rating.
Write a raving.
Leave a 5-star review if you think we're 5 stars, or if you think we're 1. Follow us on Instagram if that's what you please to do. Holly with 2 Y's, Volz, VOLZ.
Daniel.personal training. So like training wheels at the end there. Personal training. Yeah, follow us on those stuffs.
And yeah, I think that's all for this episode.
That's it.
Bye.
Until next time.
Have a good day or night.
Farewell.